Greetings all. I must warn you about sexual abuse in the first story before I begin writing anything more. The information is not disclosed in a comprehensive manner, but it is implied. Despite everything, let's start with the beginning. When I was 15, my high school teacher made an attempt to pass me. I'm also a male. I was a regular student in school. Despite not being popular or at the top, known for their intelligence, but never classified as a nerd. The person we had in my class was called Malcolm. It is my belief that Malcolm was around 40 years old. His height was 68 centimeters and his beard had a clean-shaven brown color, and he always donned blue tops. I haven't disclosed the specific lessons he taught me for personal reasons, but I had him in my class. No one had the courage to scold Malcolm, despite his strict and grumpy demeanor. He wasn't a popular teacher, but his quiet authority earned him respect from everyone. He was given a warning to avoid messing with me. I was positioned in the second row with the most favorable seating position. Although I had a friend in his class, I was generally friendly with the rest of the classmates. During the winter, we had to assess and prepare ourselves for exams that were due in the coming year. He had never been strange around me until he made a pass at me. He requested that he and another person remain to discuss our work. I didn't take anything into consideration. Looking back, it was odd that he didn't speak to us privately. In my experience, most teachers don't talk about your work with other students. However, he proceeded to send the other person away after conversing with him, and then began to pursue me. His words are overshadowed by the recollection of what occurred next. He was talking to me about his plans for the upcoming year. His hand suddenly touched my buttocks, causing me to flee from him in a state of confusion. I saw him lift his hand, but you don't expect anyone to do that. It appeared to me that he was going to bring Hage up. I found him sitting behind the desk in his chair. When I looked him in the eye, he turned around and looked back at me. He had a momentary expression of anger in his eyes, but then he laughed back. I found it peculiar as Malcolm appeared to be the kind of guy who couldn't bring himself to laugh, but he expressed remorse for nudging me. It was a mistaken identity. I opted to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was apprehensive. It was definitely not a push. He screamed for me to return to him, but I looked at the clock and mentioned having to go soon. I was hungry by lunchtime, so I wanted to meet my friends. I must admit, I was apprehensive. Malcolm's words that it would take another minute to show me something made me reluctantly approach him again. He proceeded without interruption, as if nothing had occurred before moving his hand again. This time he tried to grab my bottom, but I was too fast for him and went backwards. I yelled for him to take my dare, and his face transformed into a scarlet. He observed that it was extremely anxious and urged me to be more calm. Afterward, I exited the classroom and flew down the hallway. It wasn't long before I crossed paths with another teacher. I recounted to him what had just occurred, and it appeared horrified. Without delay, he requested that I accompany him and guided me to the headmistress's office. While she had lunch with other senior teachers, I was made to wait outside. The teacher entered and requested a private conversation, leading to the evacuation of the other teachers. I had a 15-minute wait before they called me. The teacher left me with the headmistress, who appeared to be in a state of mourning. Her words conveyed that she was contacting my parents and guaranteed me no trouble. She She urged me to disclose the truth about what happened to Malcolm. Her words caught my attention, and I couldn't help but feel disgusted. It was all incredibly surreal. My parents were furious and demanded that Malcolm be imprisoned immediately in the room. Regrettably, the headmistress informed them that an examination had to be carried out first, and the police were also contacted. The question that she asked me was, "Are you sure?" which really irritated me. The presence of CCTV cameras in the corridors of our high school resulted in me being filmed leaving Malcolm's classroom. Malcolm was apprehended. He escaped from the school and headed back to his home. It's beyond my understanding what he was hoping for. It was revealed that he had purportedly attacked several students over a 12-year span, boys and girls. He casually targeted the quieter kids, and I suspect he thought I was just one of them because I had only one friend in class. Or maybe a kid wanted to take it easy and target me. I'll never be able to anticipate. Let me tell you, I'm not interested in the details. Despite my best efforts to deny the truth, someone in my school eventually found out. There were individuals who were deeply disturbed by it. Although I am not homophobic, people treated me as a gay person like it was an insult. Some of my mates even distanced themselves from me. There were those who thought it was insignificant, and there were others who believed I was a total loser. Ultimately, only 3 of my closest friends out of 6 stood by me. Despite my diplomatic efforts and submissive showing of support, Malcolm was dismissed from the school, and other students eventually came forward. My age was not a concern for him. The first year of my country's school is designed for students aged 11 and 12. It made me feel nauseous. His hands were worse than anything else that happened to me, which had a significant impact on other victims. I became withdrawn and angry. The knowledge of the events made me feel extremely embarrassed, which was not helpful. My parents granted me the opportunity to move schools, and I was compelled to relocate to one that was only a 40-minute drive away. I was unable to go to the other local one because it was just known by everyone. Initially, I declined to participate in the court proceedings. My dad was the one who convinced me to change my mind. He took me fishing for a weekend, and I ended up being more open to him. He stated that he needed to stop feeling so embarrassed and help me remove this humiliating flaw. He declared to me that it was my fault and that he would never be ashamed of having me as his son. I'm uncertain. Hearing all that from my dad was a huge deal to me. The incident left me with the feeling of being stained into something. My dad's declaration of his love and pride made me realize that maybe I wasn't responsible for my own behavior. When D-Day arrived, I was afraid of what would be his hell, but I kept it hidden. Despite my fear of sharing Malcolm's Senate on Google, I believe he obtained a satisfactory one. We'll be decaying in there for good, but we can still work and sleep at night. It's possible that he won't be able to leave until a certain point. I've maintained contact with a few of his other victims. There were those who simply wanted to go away, and I sympathize with their feeling. Those of us who are still in contact occasionally engage in conversation. Every holiday or birthday, we always wish for each other. Our greatest achievements are communicated to us as they happen. One of the other men he attacked told me that without my presence, we wouldn't be where we are today. I believe that the bravery of all his victims is unmatched compared to my own abilities. Although Malcolm has caused harm to many lives, he will never completely destroy our futures. At the age of 15, all I could say to him is what I did. Don't bother going. I'm a 22-year-old woman who currently lives in the United States, but I also went to elementary school in this country. I experienced this at the age of about 8 or 9, and I don't have a clear memory of the specifics since I was very young, but I'll give it my best shot. In my country of origin, it is customary and expected to attend additional after-school classes. Apart from what occurred in this story, I began attending an after-school tutoring center for a subject that's not very important, which was suggested by my aunt. I've met people who are my friends even though we're living thousands of miles apart. In any case, I have a friend who is willing to share my story by being with me in all my extracurricular activities since I was 4, including gymnastics, art, and dance, as well as our supplementary academic classes. I and coordinating initiated attending the class together, and we were placed in the same class, which was highly anticipated. A man who was probably in his mid-20s or mid-30s taught this class, but I'm not entirely sure, as it's hard to determine adult age when you're that young. Regardless, his age made it impossible for him to continue doing what he did. The beginning of things seemed normal in the class, until I saw him stare at me and say strange things like, "I'm pretty, you're a good girl," etc. These comments were not particularly offensive to me as a child, but I was aware of their oddness at the time. It's possible that I didn't mention this for a few months. It wasn't long before we discovered that our teacher was returning to his home country to get married, either by him telling us or the sinner letting us know, as we would have to switch teachers. Despite the fact that all the comments were still happening, there was one particular thing that had stuck with me. During our class, the subject of his fiancée was brought up and he replied, "If you were older, I would marry you." The idea of marriage was something I understood as an 8 or 9-year-old, and it was common knowledge that this was a behavior typical of adults, which made me feel strange because I believed I had become an adult. In what manner can we enter into matrimony? Despite everything, he still caused me significant discomfort. My thoughts were filled with a feeling of disgust and dissatisfaction. Despite my lack of desire to marry you, I can't recall offering any kind of ultimatum. It's possible that I just laughed at it. During my mom's visit to pick me up that day, I shared what he had said with her, and she was visibly upset. She also informed my parents and grandfather about it, who were obviously furious. My grandfather instructed my mother to move me out of this class and into another one with a different teacher without delay. I was upset when I thought about leaving my friends, but it didn't bother me at all because they would move to my class after the teacher returned home. Despite being good friends with Courtney's mother, my mother discovered that the teacher was still making inappropriate remarks about me and saying I miss her. It's my desire that she becomes my spouse, as Courtney would tell her mother, who would also inform her about it. I'm grateful that he never hit me with his fists. My thoughts often revolve around this topic, and I am curious as to how it has impacted my perception of men and relationships. I want to express my appreciation to everyone for sharing my story. I acknowledge that it wasn't the most frightening situation, but parents, kindly keep an eye on your children, as I feel fortunate to have a strong intuition and need to inform my mother. There is a high chance that I would not have mentioned anything without making that marriage comment. It is important for everyone to have a conversation with their children and ensure that this does not happen to them. I'm a British female. We were compelled to take a foreign language course in high school, and I chose French. It was a great experience, and I completed it throughout my school years. I had a teacher named Mr. M when I was 15 years old. He had been with the school for as long as I could remember. As a teacher, I had never encountered him before. From what I observed, he appeared to be perfectly normal and not inappropriate with students or anyone else. During my science class, a lady disclosed to us that she had an idea why Mr. M and his wife were getting divorced. The news of his divorce was known throughout the school community, and he had confirmed it to some students once, but never went into detail about it. I was completely unprepared for what I heard. After turning 18, the girl informed us that Mr. M and one of his students had married her. The month of her 18th birthday was a literal turning point for her. Their marriage had ended by the time she turned 20. It was a shock to us all, but still not everyone believed it, and many others thought it was just bullshit rumor. Some of us found it unsettling, while others defended it by saying, "He waited until she was 18. I have a strong suspicion that he was involved in something with her when she was under 18 years old." Yet, it was so ghastly and disorganized. We had a man who was in his 50s, and he was our teacher. He was balding despite his long, receding hairline. It's not a disgrace. I think that story had a profound impact on how I perceived Mr. M. The rumors began to circulate in school, and eventually, someone was bold enough to ask Mr. M if his future wife was actually a student. He affirmed it to the class, stating that they connected after she graduated, and they fell in love. The fact that they had tied the knot in the month of her 18th birthday was a cause for concern. He declined to continue the discussion when questioned about it, stating that it was not fitting. The school teacher raised the issue with other teachers, who expressed a similar sentiment. It was not our concern, and we should refrain from discussing Mr. Rim's private enterprise. It's incredibly unsettling. The fact that my teacher was married to a student shortly after she turned 18 is quite unsettling. It is highly unlikely that anything was happening until she passed away. Even if it were accurate, it's odd because he was in his mid-50s during the divorce proceedings. Who is older than her? Once again, I don't think that they had any kind of relationship during her time as a student and child. It's a disgraceful way for teachers to get away with something. The classes were too much to handle with him, and he made me feel uneasy. It taught me that predators may not be perceived as prey at all times. Many of them are our instructors, and they can conceal confidential information with a facade of professionalism and kindness. It's genuinely frightening. The story was set in the middle of my 4th or 5th grade education. Back in the day, I was a reserved and introverted girl who had few friends. Essentially, I was somewhat of a recluse. Despite everything, I was in music class with one teacher. Due to my inability to remember his name, I'll use the nickname Mr. Martin for the purposes of this story. Despite his temper, Mr. Martin was considered a pleasant teacher. He seemed to be set on the smallest of things. He would frantically shout at his student if they were laid down or interrupted. His anger would escalate to the point where he would experience spit from his mouth and a bright reddish tinted face upon shouting. All of the children would be frightened. Within minutes, he would transform from a red-faced maniac to an ordinary teacher who was only elated and happy when asked about the situation. I can provide you with the details of what happened to me. I aim to provide you with a small exit from the school, as I believe it's crucial for the narrative. The school's music center was not a part of it. The music room and the main building of the school share a small hallway that runs through it. The music room was situated at a distance of at least 40 to 50 feet from the nearest classroom. I didn't get my way with the teacher in this classroom. Miss Webb was not a pleasant teacher. It appeared that she was disliked by everyone. Whenever I requested her assistance with an assignment, she would react in a snarky tone and decline to assist me. Miss Webb is also involved in the plot. One day, I went to a music class with Mr. Martin, and we were both learning how to play the keyboard. As far as I remember, we were singing Old MacDonald, and I was actually pretty proud of myself because I wasn't falling behind. The song was played without any errors by the entire class at one point. Mr. Martin was genuinely thrilled. He was so happy that he yelled out when we finished playing the song, "Good job, everyone. Let's do it again." We all started from the top, but I made a mistake halfway through the song. Despite my attempts to correct myself, the rest of the class had not yet finished. The fact that I played the wrong keys while joining them only made things worse. The song was ruined when other children started playing the wrong keys. Mr. Martin yelled out, "Shut up! It's time to stop." Everyone ceased playing without delay. He pushed hay towards me and forced me out of the classroom into the hallway outside the music room. He shouted at me in a whisper, saying, "Good day. What was the reason for your failure? What was at the center of your thoughts? You caused destruction everywhere." He had pushed me against the wall, and I had started to weep and apologize, which only served to anger him further. He snatched my throat and began to squeeze me, making it difficult for me to breathe. I initiated kicking and attempted to scream in an attempt to communicate with someone. I have no memory of making any noise, but it was loud enough for Miss Webb to burst out of her room, only to find Mr. Martin wrapped around my throat. Without delay, he went back to me, prompting Miss Webb to inquire about my well-being. There wasn't much I could recollect after that. I have a memory of Miss Webb taking me out to sit on her chair while she talked about the incident with Mr. Martin. They conversed for what seemed like an extended period before the bell rang. After that, I was handed my backpack by Mr. Martin and headed to my next class. It's possible that I had bottled up this thought, and I only shared it with my parents a few months later. They didn't have faith in me. It's possible that some people assumed I was avoiding school, but I had the benefit of knowing. Due to their lack of belief, the school was not informed and Mr. Martin's situation remained unsolved. It wasn't until years later that I figured out that Miss Webb and Mr. Martin had made an agreement to keep the affair secret, which now makes sense as a reason why he was never caught. Instead of protecting the school's students, Miss Webb had taken care of their safety. Although it's not a perfect conclusion, this is where my story culminates. There are instances when I wish I had notified the principal or informed my parents earlier, which would have obliged them to take action. It was a possibility that another student like myself would have been saved. Despite my current situation, I still have the thought of looking for Miss Webb and questioning her about it. I am uncertain about the potential benefits of such a move. It could provide me with some closure. I'm uncertain. If my children were to say something like this, I'd probably shout out hail.